So, parenting is an adventure. This is an understatement. All of you guys know this, even if you don't have kids, but if you do, you know that it's the truth. And this is a thing that doesn't necessarily change as your kids get older, it just kind of shifts. But you learn some things, right? You learn some things as your kids get older on how to work with the kids and what to say, what not to say, how to make things work. And I imagine that even as the parent of adult children, for those of you who have kids or even grandkids, there's still stuff that you're trying to figure out how to communicate and how to do, right? This is this part of it. But when your kids are young, it's all brand new, right? And when your kids are young, you're basically just trying to figure out how to make this thing work. You're looking for like the cheat code to how to raise kids. I know this because when we first got married, a year and a half after we got married, we had one kid, and within 7 years, we had 5 kids. We had a lot of kids in a short amount of time, which was not smart, right? But it is what it is. We love my kids now, and it's really fun because they're all like close together, and it's fun watching them kind of grow and do stuff together. But when they were young, I felt like we were just clawing at the edges of sanity, trying to hold stuff together. It's just the reality, right? There's a window when that happens. And one day, I thought I'd figured it out. We were driving, pulling into the house, and our oldest son and our middle daughter were fighting. He was like 5, she was like 3, and they were fighting about stuff and arguing. Now, we had taught the kids, you don't get to punch, you don't get to like respond in violence anytime somebody says something to you you don't like. You don't get to punch your brother or sister. And so they learned that, and that seemed to be going okay, but they were still using their words a lot and yelling at each other. And so these two were just kind of attacking each other. And I saw him, and he kind of reared back like he was going to punch her. And he went like this, and I was like, you know what, if you're so mad, just punch her. And he looked at me, and he's like, no. And I said, right, you're not supposed to punch. It's not a big deal, right? And I was like, sweet. I figured it out. I broke the code. I got the cheat code here. He's not going to punch her, so I can use reverse psychology, and everything's going to be great, and it's going to be smooth, and it's going to be awesome. About a week later, same type of situation. She's yelling at him, he's yelling at her. Same 2 siblings, and they're mad. And I turned to him, and he does this again. I was like, you know what? If you're so mad, just punch her, because I got the cheat code. And he rears back and says, wham, like hammers her. And I'm like, oh, no, that's not what I meant. You're not supposed to punch. And then we work through this whole thing, and I'm trying to put the genie back in the bottle. Didn't work out very well. Right? But we're always looking for these things. We're looking for ways to kind of cheat the system, or ways to make things work to our advantage, ways to fix the problems and get these things going. And what we're going to talk about today, I think, is our primary way of trying to manipulate the world to do what we want it to do. We're going through the Sermon on the Mount right now. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 5. If you don't have a Bible, you can grab one of these in the seat in front of you. Turn to page 700, and you can actually have that Bible if you'd like to. We want everybody who comes to worship with us to have the Word. But in this passage here, we're looking at the longest sermon that we have recorded of Jesus. And in this sermon, Jesus has been talking about some pretty serious stuff in this section we're in. He talked about hate and hating somebody, or calling somebody an idiot, and ultimately that's the same as murdering somebody, which was super not fun to work through. And then we talked last week about marriage and divorce and adultery and all of those things. A super serious topic, right? A super hard topic. And if you were here, I know that the Holy Spirit really worked on a lot of us about the way that we were doing life. And so you go like murder and adultery and divorce and all those things that are super serious. And then Jesus is going to turn to something today, which seems less of a big deal. Today we're going to talk about honesty. We're going to talk about keeping the things that we promise. We're going to talk about the way that we tell the truth, which seems like a much less important conversation than the couple that we've just had. But what we're going to see today in the words of Jesus, in this passage and some others that are tied into this passage, is this one thing, this idea of honesty, this idea of the way that we speak truth, really speaks towards where our hearts are with God, and ultimately towards where our faith is with God. If we can't do this, if we're in a place where we don't do this, it actually challenges where our faith is and our hearts are. So let's dig in. Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse 33, and we'll go from there. You have also heard that our ancestors were told, you must not break your vows, you must carry out the vows that you made to the Lord. So Jesus then turns and he talks to the people, and he says, you've heard that that it was said that the Bible says that you're not supposed to break your vows. You must keep your vows that were made to the Lord. Now that seems a little strange in our culture. Like, sure, you make a vow, you keep a vow, but the idea here, right, is that people were saying, I swear on this, or I swear to God that this is what's going to happen. I swear to God that I'm going to do this, or I swear on His temple that this is what's going to happen. Why would you say, I swear to God, or I swear to these things? Because people don't naturally trust that what you're saying is the truth, right? So you're saying, no, I promise you that if I don't keep my promise, then God is going to smite me, right? That's what you're trying to do. Which implies, if this was something that was constantly happening, that even in the first century, people lied to each other all the time, right? The people were constantly trying to deceive each other, that people were constantly trying to get an upper hand with their words to try to manipulate the people around you. And so they were getting to this place where they felt like they had to swear to do this. But what Jesus is going to say challenges that idea, verse 34 through 36. But I say, do not make any vows. Do not say by heaven, because heaven is God's throne, and do not say by the earth, because the earth is His footstool, and do not say by Jerusalem, for Jerusalem is the city of the great King. Do not even say by my head, for you cannot turn one hair white or black. So, Jesus, and he elaborates actually later on in Matthew about this, but Jesus is saying that in the culture, they had figured out a way to swear and not to have to do what it is that they were doing. So this was the idea. You would swear on certain things, and by swearing on those things, you might be able to manipulate the situation to get away with something. So you'd say, I swear on the altar or on the temple and that I'm going to do this. Which sounds weird, but in the idea is that, well, that's God's temple, it's God's stuff, He's going to smite me if I don't do it. But because you don't have control of the temple and you don't have control of the altar, you make a promise on that, and if it doesn't come true, well, that's not my fault, that's God's fault. God should have done something, He didn't do it, and so I'm not bound by the promise that I made. Which sounds silly until you think about how we do in our society. Okay, kids. Do they still do the whole fingers crossed thing? I don't know. You know what I'm talking about, the fingers crossed thing? Like you just say, well, I promise you that I'm going to do this, but I had my fingers behind my back and they were crossed and I crossed my toes inside my shoes, so I don't have to keep the promise now. That thing is stupid. But we do that to manipulate. Let me paint a hypothetical picture, just a hypothetical picture. Imagine a tall, skinny, goofy-looking kid in the early 90s at Hoover Middle School in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hypothetical, that kid. Let's just imagine that this kid existed, and so hypothetically, this kid one day was wanting a Gold Bar. Now, you may not know what a Gold Bar is, but it's like a peanut butter bar with chocolate on top. Phenomenal, right? They served them at Hoover Middle School, and imagine that this kid was obsessed with these things and he didn't have any money for them. You can just picture that in your mind, right? This hypothetical situation, and then the kid goes up to another kid and says, hey, can I borrow 50 cents so I can get a Gold Bar? And the other kid says, sure. But what he didn't know was that this tall, skinny, goofy kid had his fingers behind his back and he had his fingers crossed. So now he doesn't have to pay him back the next time the kid wants to give it to him, right? He could say, I had my fingers crossed. Sorry. No luck. Now, if you're the kid who's loaned the money, is that satisfactory? No, it's not satisfactory at all. In fact, it's silly. It's dumb. It doesn't make any sense. In the same way, Jesus is talking to a culture where people would say, well, I swear that this is what's going to happen. I swear on the temple that this is what's going to happen. I'm going to pay you back. Well, I don't have to pay you back because the temple didn't, God didn't make me do it. But if you swore on the offering that was made in the temple, that was your offering, well, you had control on that, which means you had to pay things back. This is the type of mental gymnastics that people were doing to be able to get away with stuff that they wanted to get away with. Because they wanted to manipulate, they wanted to lie. Or another situation that we see in Mark chapter 7 is this. Then he said, you skillfully sidestep God's law in order to hold on to your own tradition. For instance, Moses gave you this law from God. Honor your father and mother, and anyone who speaks disrespectfully of his father and mother must be put to death. But you say it is all right for people to say to their parents, 'Sorry, I can't help you, for I have vowed to give to God what I would have given to you.' In this way, you let them disregard their needy parents. And so you cancel the word of God in order to hand down your own tradition. And this is only one example among many others." So this is what the religious leaders were allowing. Let me paint the picture for you. You're going to hear the deception, but you can hear how people would do this. So, what I could do at some point in time, I have this commandment. I have this commandment from God to take care of my father and mother, to honor my father and mother. That's something you do. And in the first century, that really implied that when your mom and dad were too old to be able to take care of themselves, you would take them in, or you would help them out financially as their sons so that they would be able to live. But, here's the loophole. I could promise my estate to God when I die. So, my money that I have raised for myself, that I've worked for with my hard work in my hands, I've raised for myself, I am now going to promise to God, whenever I die, anything that's left over is going to go to God. So sorry, Mom and Dad, I can't help you. But here's the cool part. Until I die, it's my money. So if I want to go buy a car, I can buy a car for me. If I want to do these things, I can buy a car for myself. But I don't have to take care of my family because that money is all promised for God. And the religious leaders are like, well, it's, tomato, tomato. It seems to read out okay. I guess this is good, which sounds crazy. But for Jesus, this is something that he saw all the time. Because here's the struggle. Lies all sound crazy to us until we're doing them. Our own lies and manipulation make perfect sense to us because they're getting us what it is that we want. They're allowing us to control the narrative, at least in our minds, to be able to get what it is that we want or what it is that we think that we need. And we'll rationalize away and we can come up with good reasons why we should do this, but ultimately what they're doing is they're crushing our hearts and our faith that God is going to provide. So I want to talk to you guys today about 3 things that I see as reasons why it is that we deceive, why it is that we lie, why it is that we are tempted to do exactly what it is that Jesus is talking about here. We lie. One reason we lie is to look good. We want people to see us as in a way that we know really isn't honest. And I can say this is probably my area of most constant deception. My primary fear, and I've talked about this before, but like one of the primary drivers for me is I am deathly afraid that you guys are going to see that I'm an idiot, that I don't know what I'm talking about, and I will fake it on stuff when I don't know what I'm talking about. For instance, I would love to convince you that I am a man's man who knows how to fix things. I would love for you to believe that. I really would, but I'm not. I know this. A few years ago, my car broke down, and a guy here at the church and I, we actually, the transmission went out, and we had to replace the transmission. He told me he could help me out in my shop, and so we replaced the transmission. We pulled the engine out and the transmission out and put it all out and put it back in and everything like that. Well, we didn't do it. He did it. I just turned the wrenches whenever he told me to try to fix the doohickey. I didn't know what I was talking about. He'd say, "Hey, can you go put the half shaft in there?" And I'm like, "Half shaft? What's a half shaft?" I didn't know what he was talking about. I had no idea on any of these things. And so he had to get down on the floor, get it started, and then I'd say, "Oh, so now you just want me to turn this thing?" And then I would do that. But anytime he or the other guy that came over to help started talking about cars, I would stand there and I would say, "Yes, I totally agree." I had no idea what we were talking about. I was an idiot when it came to cars, but I did not want them to know. I was talking with the other guy that was there about this just this last week because I was talking about what I was going to be preaching. And I said, "Yeah, I have a real problem with this and I want to do this." And he's like, "Oh, I know that. I could totally tell you had no idea what was going on. I just didn't say anything." I'm like, "Thanks, jerk." But it's true, right? I don't want you to know that I can't do it. Because from the youngest of ages, that was the thing that I constantly heard about. And so I don't want you to know that I'm not capable. And I'll lie. Or at least pretend that I know what's going on. Instead of just being honest, like, I don't know. Help me out here. So I'll lie to look good. To try to build up a relationship that's not exactly maybe the one that God has for me. Or, for some of us, this is just the truth. We lie for financial gain. We lie for financial advantage. Right? We do this because we need something we don't think that God's going to provide. In Leviticus chapter 6, God talks to Moses about this exact thing. Suppose one of you sins against your associate and is unfaithful to the Lord. Suppose you cheat in a deal involving a security deposit, or steal, or commit fraud, or you find lost property and you lie about it, or you lie while swearing to tell the truth, or you commit any other such sin. If you sin in any of these ways, you're guilty. You must give back whatever you stole, or the money that you took in extortion, or your security deposit, or lost property you found, or anything obtained by swearing falsely. You must make restitution by paying the full price, plus an additional 20%, or the person you have harmed. To the person you have harmed. On the same day, you must present a guilt offering. So God says to Moses, look, if you lie in a business deal, or you deceive somebody, or you find something on the ground and you pick it up and then somebody else goes and looks for it and you don't admit it, like if you lie about something in order to get control of something, if you do these things, that's actually a lie, it's actually a sin, it needs to be made right, it's not supposed to stay that way. If you find something on the ground, it's not yours. I guess God didn't know about finders, keepers, losers, weepers, right? This is how we do life. We do life with the understanding that deception is just part of it. Right? Deceiving people. I say that. I've been around the church long enough to have heard things and heard people say stuff. And being honest, I had an elder in a church that I was in who was super honest about this. He ran a big business, owner of a big business, and he said, look, I struggle with this because I can't do my job with my business and be a Christian at the same time during the week. Those were his words. It's like I can't live like Jesus and do my job. I can't run my business that way. The society, the culture that he was in was so corrupted that he didn't feel like he could be like Jesus and be successful in his business. It's a part of our culture. It's like deep in our culture, right? It's buried in so many different aspects of our culture. We expect people to lie to us. Right? We expect people to lie to us, and we expect our friends to lie to other people so that we can all have control. Right? We expect this. We want this, but the truth of the matter is, Jesus is saying this is a big deal. That idea of vowing for something so that you can get in or get out of it is actually something that's a really big problem. And the last way I came up with, as I was thinking about this on reasons that we lie, is to control others or to stay out of trouble. All right? We want to have control. We want to try to make sure that the narrative fits what it is that we're trying to do. We're trying to stay out of trouble. We don't want to get caught. And so we lie. You know, we get pulled over. Officer says, hey, I got you doing 52 and a 40, and you're like, you're never going to say, actually, just a second earlier, I was doing 74. Right? You're like, yes, 52. Right? That type of a thing. We're going to do that because we don't want to get in trouble. And we want to control it. But here's the rub. You start small, and it keeps going. Right? When we start in these ways, we start in this way where we want to get control, but it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Right? I've had couples I've had people in my office who were in the middle of having an affair, knowing that they needed to get out of it. But they're like, if I say something, then she's going to leave me. Or if I say something, then I'm going to break this other person's heart. If I say something, then my kids are going to know, and it's going to blow up the relationship with my family. If I say this and I say this, and so they continue in these things. And they didn't set out to get that way. It started on a much smaller scale. And Brandon says this, I think it's so wise. Sin will always take you further than you wanted to go. It'll keep you longer than you wanted to stay, and it'll make you pay more than you ever wanted to pay. Right? You didn't set out to be there. But here you are. When we get to that place, when we try to control the narrative, when we get to that place where we try to lie, it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and it takes over. It takes over. And ultimately, what it does, the reason it's a problem, is it's an attack on our faith. I want to share with you guys something, why Jesus is talking about this. At the very end of the Bible, the last book of the Bible is Revelation, and at the very end of Revelation, there's this picture of a giant battle between the forces of darkness against the armies of light, and then Jesus shows up in like one sentence, the whole thing's over, right? Because it's awesome. Jesus casts the devil and his demons into the lake of burning fire. It's over. Fantastic. But after that, in Revelation 21, we read this. And he also said, "It is finished. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To all who are thirsty, I will give freely from the springs of the water of life. All who are victorious will inherit all these blessings, and I will be their God, and they will be my children. But cowards, unbelievers, the corrupt, murderers, the immoral, those who practice witchcraft, idol worshippers, and all liars, their fate is in the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death." Jesus says that the cowards and unbelievers and the corrupt and the murderers, the immoral, those who practice witchcraft, idol worshippers, and all liars, their faith is in the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death. He says all of these things, and we can agree, murderers and adulterers, we can agree that these people living in these types of sins, yeah, they like hell is there, but liars? Hell? I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you this because this is what Jesus says. The reason this is such a big deal is when we get to the place where we feel like we need to lie, we completely have lost faith that God is going to provide. We don't actually trust Him. When I lie to you to try to prove to you that I know what I don't know, I don't trust that God is going to give me the reputation that I need, I don't deserve, that I need, that I desire. When I lie, if we lie about finances, we're not actually trusting that God is going to provide what He promised to us. We pray, give us today, God, our daily bread, that God's going to provide enough for today. And I think that's great, God, but I need bread for next week too, so let's just get this thing going here, and I will lie about it to get it. Or when we lie to try to protect ourselves, we're not trusting. And I was talking, like I said, about people in affairs or people in these things. We're not trusting that God's going to take care of it, and so it stacks and it builds and it builds and it builds. And I've seen this. I've seen this in the church. Had a church I was in where there was a couple that they were over the missions, the money that we gave to missions, and they had a checkbook, and we didn't have very good oversight over the situation, and we were trusting. And I think what happened is one day they were a little short on funds, and they thought, we need some money. We don't have any money to get through this. We'll write ourselves a check, and we'll pay this bill that we've got. Well, one turned into two turned into four, and this happened over a long span of time, and that ended up being tens of thousands of dollars. Because once you start down that path, it's really easy to keep going. I want to tell you something about these people. They were good people. They weren't people who were they didn't take the job thinking, sweet, as soon as I get this, now I got all kinds of extra money. And we know this because many of us have been in maybe not the same exact situation with finances, but something in our work or in a relationship that we took too far, or we did something and we ended up trying to lie to cover it up, right? And you do this, and you do this, and you do this, and pretty soon you're in this place where it's like, I have no idea how to get out, but I don't trust God to get me out of it, so I'm just going to keep going. when Jesus says, when you're making a vow, you don't need to make these big big vows on things, because ultimately what you're doing is you're not even sure yourself that you're going to tell the truth. Instead, and this is my bottom line, Jesus' followers say what they mean and mean what they say. Or, in the words of Jesus, which are much better than mine, verse 37, Matthew chapter 5, verse 37, just say a simple, yes, I will, or no, I won't. Anything beyond this is from the evil one. This is what Jesus is saying for us. He says, look, if you just say, yes, I will, or no, I won't, just be open and real and trust God with the rest. Right? You don't have to stack all kinds of extra stuff on. Just say what you're going to do, say the truth, and trust that God's going to take care of it. Live in such a way where you don't have to lie. How beautiful would it be? And I know some of you know what I'm talking about. Some of you, this is like, I tell the truth all the time, it's not a big deal. Well, for the rest of us, where this can be a struggle, how beautiful would it be to have an entire day where you didn't have to worry about covering for anything? To just have freedom. Because that's what it is that Jesus wants. And that's why Jesus says that in Revelation 21:8, talking about liars in hell, is because when you get to that place where you're controlling your life, you refuse to trust that God is going to do it. You refuse to walk with God because you don't think that God is really capable, and you don't want to have a relationship with Him if that's what it's going to be. And for many of us, I've seen this happen. Once you get into a place where deception and lies are the way, it becomes next to impossible to worship God. You come in, and your heart is cold, and your heart is, you want to sing, but you can't. You want to hear the word, but the thing is just banging on your heart, and it's like, I can't do this because of this. And if I trust God, that means I'm going to have to get rid of this other stuff. If I trust God, I'm going to have this conversation. I don't want to have that conversation, so I keep going. But Jesus says, let your yes be yes, and your no be no. Trust God with your words, and your heart will have a completely different outlook. So how do we do that? How do we get to the place where we trust God in this way? I got 3 things I want to ask you to do. One, and I want to ask you with your head to list your lies. Now that sounds crazy. We've been giving out some journals. We got some outside. If you have that with you, maybe you take down and you just open that up. Keep it to yourself. I'm not asking you to show it to somebody or anything like that yet. But write down those things. Write those things that you know right down. I'm probably deceiving people about this right now. If you want to, you can write them down and throw the thing away. Write it down and burn it in the fire. But I need you to see it in front of you. Not because I'm trying to make you feel guilty. Not because we're trying to manipulate you in any way. But oftentimes our lies don't seem like that big of a deal to us, because we have rationalized away why they don't really matter. We said this before too. No one has lied to you more than you. And when we sit there and we rationalize away why this isn't a big deal, until we see it in front of us, we don't understand. So write it down and you'll start to see a pattern. Maybe it's self-preservation. Maybe it's financial manipulation. But you'll start to see a pattern. And that leads you to your heart. I want to ask you to pray about why you do it. To honestly talk to God about why you do that. And I talk to God about why it is that I feel I need people to see something when it's just deception. Why do we do that? Why don't I have faith in God to trust that He's going to provide? And ultimately, then I want to ask you to do something, and it's the hard part. Not that any of this is easy. But confess your lie to someone. Maybe it's the person you've been deceiving. Maybe it's just somebody you need to pray with you. But to confess it so that it's out there, that the power that Satan is using over your heart goes away. In James chapter 5, reread this. Confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The earnest prayer of a righteous person has great power and produces wonderful results. When we confess our sin, God heals our heart, and sometimes He heals our bodies. Like there are things that our sins just carry with us, but confessing these things removes the power of them. To have the freedom to be able to go through the day and not have to hide starts with having to get rid of the stuff that you've been hiding. To remove the power of that. So here in just a minute, John's going to come up, we're going to take communion, and when we do that, there will be some of us that are in the back ready to pray with you. Maybe now's the time of confession. Maybe you're just in a place where you need to sit in your chair and write some stuff down. But to get these things out there is an act of faith. To put these things out there says, God, I trust you with your word. And Jesus says, this is the way I'm going to live. Give me strength to live it. Give us strength to be people who are honest. Let me pray with you guys, and let's see what God does.